Hey guys, welcome to the Freedom to Flourish podcast. Your co-host Dr. Joel here with Dr. Tim Augustiniak. Guys, today we're talking about heartburn. We see this issue all the time. This is not something I've dealt with personally a lot myself, but it's something that if you have experienced this, it's no fun, and it's one of those conditions that our health system, our medical system. Um, it isn't really trying to really get to the root of the problem here. And so we're going to jump in. We're going to talk about just talk about heartburn, kind of what's going on with things, and what tends to be at the root of the issue, and how we've helped people get rid of their heartburn totally. So I'm excited. Dr. Tim, let's kind of jump in with this. Give me
Yeah,
some backstory on this topic
yeah.
as we kind of start jumping in here.
Well, first things first, I am absolutely jealous that you haven't really dealt with heartburn a whole lot because I've dealt with it a lot. So
Oh, I'm
I've
sorry.
mentioned it. I've mentioned it on the podcast before, but a big part of the reason that I do this for work is I have a condition called eosinophilic esophagitis. And it does tend to go along the heartburn line because it is so eosinophils are white blood cells that respond to allergies and parasites, and then
Right.
esophagitis is just inflammation of the esophagus. And
Right.
so eosinophilic esophagitis, so some sort of allergy that contributes to swelling or inflammation of the esophagus. And so I'll actually get where food and things kind of get stuck at the base of my esophagus right above my stomach. And I just get local irritation in my stomach. My whole digestive tract really gets pretty significant problems if I have different foods that provoke it. And so one of the first symptoms that I will get is heartburn if I decide to just kind of cheat a little bit on eating some things like, if I have a piece of pizza, man, um, I kid you not, it's almost been a year now. It's been 11 months. So last March, my wife and I were at her just some family birthday party and they had Papa John's pizza. And I had one of those days that I said, screw this. I'm just going to be normal. And I ate 3 pieces of pizza. Holy hell, dude. It was, man, excuse my language today, but I kid you not, the next 3 weeks, every single night, I was throwing up. I chugged through probably
Oh
three
no.
family-sized bottles of Pepto-Bismol. It was terrible. And so
Oh no.
whole reason I'm getting into this, I completely understand how our patients feel when they experience stuff like this because there can be it can be so disheartening because if I didn't do this for work, I have no idea what the heck I would do. I joke around and
Yeah.
say if I didn't do this for work, I might be dead right now. And it it might be a little bit of an exaggeration, but I sure as heck would not be in great health. I mean, back in high school, my issues got pretty bad. The recommendation was just oral steroids to calm down the reaction and get my immune system to shut off. So I don't know what things would look like right now if I didn't do this, but it is so disheartening when you can't figure out the cause of heartburn and
Yeah.
upper GI issues. They're just so incredibly
I,
uncomfortable. So
yeah.
hopefully this episode will help our listeners figure out, or at least have more of a thought process behind identification of what things could be causing problems, and maybe provide a step-by-step path forward that they can maybe seek some, or at least find some relief with things. Because all in all, a lot of the recommendations that we provide patients, if it's say like a food sensitivity, it's not terribly difficult to fix. It's just eliminate the
Right.
stimulus, take some natural antihistamines, and that list is not exceptionally long. And so if you eliminate the food and do those things, you're going to get relief one way or another. And so there's other things like infections or other stuff that can cause it that might not provide as much relief, but we'll dig into that as well. So all in
Yeah.
all, with this whole topic, goal for today is let's talk about one, what causes things, two, why we see some flaws in at least the medical model for how they quote treat heartburn or reflux,
Right.
whatever you want to call it. And then
Right.
from there, what are some common things that we see that drive things, and what are some steps that we take and that we can recommend our patients take to identify and then fix these problems? So, um, anyway, let's get into those things. So,
Yeah.
Dr.
Yeah.
Joel, do you want to kind of walk us through what you see for what your patients come in taking and the recommendations made by their primary care or whoever's prescribing medications and trying to treat their reflux slash heartburn?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I kind of alluded to at the beginning, it's a really really poor approach that doesn't actually it's not actually supporting your body and healing itself. And this is what we talk about all the time is that the body wants to heal itself. You just need to give it the right things. And when it comes to the reflux and heartburn, a lot of times they're recommending some kind of proton pump inhibitor like Prilosec and things like that, which basically helps reduce the stomach acid. And we'll talk about in just a second kind of why that's actually oftentimes the opposite of what you want to do. But the wild thing is, even though it may be the opposite of what you want to do, it does tend to help people relieve their symptoms. But again, it's not necessarily helping your body to heal itself. So a lot of times when people come in, they're on different antacids and Tums and stuff like that. And the first thing that we have to talk about a lot of times is like, hey, there's usually going to be certain foods that are going to trigger this. So in general, we need to identify those foods and we need to kind of remove them from the nutrition. So for a lot of people, it's fried foods. And I think a lot of that has to do with more so like the seed oils, the high omega-6s, and how they stress the overall digestive system, especially the gallbladder and the liver and bile flow. Fried food is a big one. Sometimes spicy foods can kind of irritate things. Different things like nightshades, tomatoes, peppers, that kind of stuff. Those tend to be like kind of the top drivers of things. And the wild thing is that a lot of times when people have heartburn, it's kind of interesting, Dr. Tim, is that there's sometimes a component of like, I'm just gonna be direct and say like almost like food addiction. Like basically there's this component of like, I want to eat that food no matter what. And I'm just going to kind of eat, I'm just going to take some Tums afterwards or whatever. So I don't feel bad. And it's an issue in that with just that topic kind of extends to a lot of other things then. When there's issues kind of with some of the self-control and certain foods and things like that. But I think a lot of times when there's like this food that we kind of keep going back to, we can't say no to be honest, I think a lot of that goes back to like the gut balance and basically the different microbiome imbalances that can cause us to be more addicted to or driven towards or attracted to certain foods, which is kind of an interesting topic. Getting off course just a little bit here, but essentially I see a lot of people come in, they're on antacids, they're taking a ton of Tums, and doctors don't even really talk to them about nutrition, about, hey, those foods, you need to avoid those foods. And then I also find that they don't talk to them about the root issues. Like, for example, we'll jump into this, but most of the time, gastric reflux and heartburn is caused by low stomach acid. And that has to do with the cardiac sphincter between the esophagus and the stomach. But then also you have, things like poor bile flow. Your liver makes the bile, your gallbladder stores it and then releases it with food. And if you kind of eat and it just sits there, then what happens is that really can irritate the stomach and kind of things can feel very uncomfortable. Hiatal hernias are super common. And then to be honest, one of the biggest things that I'll probably get into a little bit more here is probably, I would say, from what I see, is leaky gut stuff, which is, the gut lining is inflamed, there's infections, there's a lot of inflammation, sometimes different food sensitivities. And what I find drives a lot of leaky gut stuff is parasites. And so we address a lot of that stuff and we find that people feel a lot better. That's kind of the big picture with things, Dr. Tim. Tell me a little bit more about, do you see that similarly with patients that are coming in with heartburn? They're on antacids, they're on Tums. And what do you see a lot of times be connected to that? And how are you going about that with patients?
Every single time they're on Prilosec, they're on omeprazole, whatever Zol they're going to be on. It's always there. If they come in for heartburn and they've been the medical route, they're going to be on one of those medications, or they will have been prescribed those and said, I don't want to take this because I read all the side effects that will creep in long term. One of the most notable of those is going to be things like bone mineral density issues, things of that nature. And, a lot of people are like, I don't know what the correlation is there. Why would that be an issue? In order to have proper bone mineral density, you need proper tissue acidity. Well, if you're reducing stomach acid all the time just to help curb the symptom, you're going to lead into bone mineral density issues.
Yeah.
Now, we've talked about this before. Majority of our patients are women. And so what is another thing that women have to worry about later on in life? Bone mineral density issues, independently from this whole process. So if you have, if you're a woman and you're going to go through menopause and, have that reduction in estrogens and that gradual tapering off of bone mineral density anyway, adding something like this on top of it is not exactly a great idea. We want to fix the root cause. But it's always, oh yeah, it's not diet. There's no way that causes it. There's no great research, this and that, and all these things. The only thing that really shows that it helps is these medications. Great. Well, why do we fix this all the time in our practices without using those medications? And so the overall umbrella term, or I guess, um, yeah, I guess we can call it that. The overall general idea that goes along with heartburn and what causes it, I would argue, is some sort of neurologic irritation to your cardiac sphincter. Something
Yeah.
that is going to disrupt your vagus nerve tone, your parasympathetic tone to your cardiac sphincter. And so that
Yep.
valve is not going to open and close like it should. It's going to get stuck open a little bit, and then that's when acid creeps up, and that's when you feel it. Does not necessarily mean there's high acid, just means that it's low, and therefore that valve is not closing properly, and you detect it. When that valve is closed due to high acid and good integrity of the parasympathetic nervous system, that's when you do not detect anything, and that's when you digest effectively. Now, like you said, food sensitivities, leaky gut, microbiome imbalances, all of the above are possibilities. And so some patients, and this is always awesome, if say it's just a food sensitivity, as if that's like, a small thing, but it's
Yeah, a
of all the
single
things
thing.
to treat, it's simple, don't eat the food, stop it, get some help, throwback.
Lord.
Um, for those who haven't listened to that episode, what's that episode called again?
Stop
Stop
these
doing
things
these
or something like
things.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a reference to Michael Jackson or Michael Jordan in the McDonald's
Yeah.
All-American game. Michael Jackson, that's hilarious. But
Yeah.
anyway, just stop eating the food. That's really it. Stop eating the food and then take some natural antihistamines to calm that reaction down. In situations like that, if you do not take a antihistamine to calm things down, your immune system can keep staying ramped up. So histamines and immune system activity tends to have a positive feedback loop where the more that it does its job, the more that it wants to keep doing its job. And so you need something to break that cycle. It is not terribly uncommon that I'll have patients come into the office and say, I tried an elimination diet and it didn't do anything. Well, even if you avoided it for weeks, sometimes you need to take something to get the immune system to relax. A lot of the
Yeah.
nutrients that are on the list of antihistamines that calm this reaction down are also on the list of nutrients that support something called interleukin 10. And so interleukin 10 basically tells all of our, infection fighting immune system cells, our hypersensitivity immune system cells, our autoimmune perpetuating immune system cells to just stop and relax and calm down. And so sometimes you just need interleukin 10 to just tell everything to just quiet down and quit reacting so much. And so, one way or the other, antihistamine or interleukin 10, one way or the other, it just tells everything to calm down. And so that's one part of it that, you just got to figure out, okay, well, maybe you do a food journal. Maybe you do a food journal and figure out, well, what are the ingredients that are in all these things that I'm
Yeah.
eating,
Yeah.
and just kind of keep track of that. That can be a little difficult sometimes, not necessarily to keep the journal, but it is not uncommon that patients will come in and they'll say, well, it's every question I ask, hey, does it happen during this? Does it happen during this? Does any food provoke it? Does anything else provoke it? Yada, yada. I don't know. It's just a problem all the time. I can't
Yeah.
ever get it to stop. And
Yeah.
so once we go through in the office and do some muscle testing and figure out what's driving things, and hopefully they get a little bit of relief, they'll go from reacting all the time to being able to identify the circumstantial, you know, evidence of, I hurt during this time or it burns during this time. Oh yeah, I ate, I was feeling really good and then I had, we went to go get Mexican for dinner and I had chips and salsa and that set it off. Okay. Well, it's probably nightshades at that point. Or we went and got
Yeah.
ice cream and oh, it was terrible. Okay, dairy is probably the culprit.
Right.
But when it comes to infections, I'm sorry, yeah, infections. When it comes to infections, those can be kind of random. Maybe even in situations like that, it can be a bit more difficult to identify because, say high FODMAPs. feed some sort of microbiome imbalance / infection. And if that's the case, I mean, the list of high FODMAP foods is what, 150? There's a
A lot of
lot of
stuff,
foods
yeah.
on that list,
A lot of
maybe not
popular
that many,
foods.
but say that again, please.
A lot of popular foods too.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even bananas, ripe versus unripe bananas have different FODMAP content. Broccoli, cauliflower, depending on how well it's cooked, may or may not digest better. And it can be very difficult to pin down in that case. And so if you notice that there's not really any rhyme or reason for what you eat and what provokes it, might be an infection, and that FODMAP foods are provoking it. That could be
Yep.
on the list. In those situations, I mean, antimicrobial herbs are really the fix. It's just kind of difficult to pin that down on your own. But those two things of all the different types of issues that will be driving this, those are probably the top two that I see. But regardless of whether it's allergy, this is kind of the whole thing I meant to get to with this whole long monologue. But whether it's allergy or whether it's infection, it's really awesome when all you do is you deal with those things and heartburn goes away.
Yep.
However, if this has been a long-term problem, sometimes you need to deliberately try to increase stomach acid afterwards.
Yeah.
And so taking things like zinc, betaine hydrochloride, other nutrients that help increase stomach acid production, those can be very, very helpful to increase acid again. And whenever that conversation comes up, I don't know about you in your practice, but if I say, hey, your heartburn isn't going to go away until you add acid on top of it, that kind of gets a little bit of an eyebrow raise from patients because they're like, oh crap, I don't know if I want to do that because that sounds like it's going to hurt and make things worse. But
Right.
I mean, I've had so many people, they take a stomach acid replacement and heartburn goes away pretty much
Yeah.
immediately. And so it's
Yep.
all about that valve, restore neurologic tone, parasympathetic tone to that valve
Yeah.
by reducing inflammation and increasing stomach acid. Heartburn will go away. You
Yep.
just got to figure out what the proper order of operations is, because if you just add betaine hydrochloride in first, you're going to have a bad day. You gotta get rid of the inflammatory stimulus, or else if you do
Yep.
betaine hydrochloride on top of that, that is not fun whatsoever. And some people are
Yeah.
really sensitive anyway, where things are going to burn regardless if you don't do a very, very, very low dose and then slowly work your way up.
Yeah,
So,
totally.
um,
Dr. Tim, just to clarify with the listener, the cardiac sphincter, again, can you kind of tell us again, like where that is? And you mentioned something that I want to emphasize for our listener that I think is really important. You mentioned neurological dysfunction. You didn't mention chemical dysfunction. You didn't say too much stomach acid causes that sphincter to be dysfunction. You mentioned neurological dysfunction. Can you just kind of mention again, what is that sphincter? Where is it specifically? And how does that cause heartburn symptoms?
okay, so cardiac sphincter, anatomy lesson here. So your esophagus, you have your mouth, you swallow food, it goes through down your throat into your esophagus, and then your esophagus goes down and carries your food to your stomach. Okay, your air and your food, tubes that are in your neck and your throat. There's something called an epiglottis that kind of closes off your airway when you swallow and pushes everything, food and drink, down your esophagus. Okay, when you get to the bottom of the esophagus and a lot of different landmarks in your digestive tract, you have valves that separate things. And so with people with hypermotility, chronic diarrhea, they will have chronically open valves, like such as the valve of Houston, ileocecal valve that separates the large and small intestine. Their valves will be stuck open. Now, in the case of heartburn, the cardiac sphincter lies between the esophagus and the stomach. Okay, and so it just basically keeps. It's like the lid for the stomach. It closes it off, keeps everything within the stomach. Now, what I mean by neurologic irritation, with what we do, our listeners who have come to see us in the office, great, you understand what we do. Now, our listeners who, maybe you're just kind of exploring functional medicine and natural health stuff, but a big part of what we do is something called applied kinesiology. It's that hands-on neurologic testing technique, uses the same neurology as reflexology, acupuncture, things like that. But our means of identifying underlying organ issues and finding indicators for all of our patients' symptoms when they come in is manual muscle testing, looking for neurologic dysfunction. And so we can use that to assess, is there some sort of neurologic irritation to different valves, to organs, to muscles, whatever it is. And so using that, say there's heartburn, we can find that valve for some reason is not happy. Find that inherent muscle weakness that we'll find associated with that and see what organ that points to. Now, when we figure out what organ that points to, we'll make sure that that's truly the root cause through whatever system of checks and balances we use. And then from there, we will treat that organ nutritionally, depending on what we find. Now, that's where we treat organ reflexes, yada, yada, reset the nervous system, get things working better, and real time in the office, quote, fix the organ issue by treating that reflex. Once we fix that, it will then show us that valve integrity and the neurologic tone to it has restored. And so a lot of different situations, like here's an example I always like to use. Patients always ask us, well, how come my labs show that I'm low on these hormones, but you're finding that I'm high, or that my liver is struggling to get rid of them? Well, it's because your nervous system has to tell your liver to work exponentially harder to get rid of, your testosterone from your testosterone pellet, or your birth control that you should not be taking. The amount of input or effort that your body goes through for your organs to work is dictated by the nervous system. And so the more that your organs have to work to accomplish something, the harder the nervous system is pushed and the more irritated it gets. And so if you've got a lot of local inflammation and irritation to your cardiac sphincter, your stomach, you name it, you're going to get some sort of neurologic change where it's not going to function as well, and you're going to get neurologic dysfunction of that cardiac sphincter, where the parasympathetic or the calming stimulus that regulates good tone to our organs and allows them to function properly is just not going to be there. It's really not going to function all that great. And so generally speaking, if you're want like maybe a one sentence description of our goal with treatment, it is to regulate neurologic tone to the organs through the physical, emotional, and chemical aspects of health. If we figure out through a system of checks and balances and get those things regulated, that's when people really get better. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And just to reemphasize too, the whole thing with the stomach acid, right? Because everybody talks about how reflux and heartburn is an issue with too much stomach acid. But essentially what we're saying is, no, it's not that you have too much stomach acid. That's rarely the case. Simply because, most of the people that have reflux and heartburn, their body's under so much stress that the more stress that your body's under, the less stomach acid your body produces. And as you get older, your body produces less stomach acid. And what happens along with that is that neurological irritation that you mentioned, where that valve kind of opens between your esophagus and stomach. And then even though your acid is lower, it'll actually push up and kind of irritate that through that valve. And then that's what people are feeling. So that's super helpful. I just wanted to emphasize that again, Dr. Tim, because I think that is so core to understanding heartburn, is to understanding this is more of a neurological issue. But when we look at the neurological issue, it doesn't necessarily mean you need to go see a neurologist. It means you need to understand that your nervous system is to function a certain way. And the root of that issue goes back then to other things, like you mentioned, the physical, chemical, emotional. The physical would be like the hiatal hernia issue, which is usually due to other chemical root issues and things like that. Sometimes emotional issues play a part in our health. That's kind of an undeniable thing. So that's good. That's helpful. Dr. Tim, maybe let's kind of transition a little bit here to, to the patient that's coming in with heartburn. Obviously, across the board with every condition, we talk about like you need to identify what's activating this, what's worsening this, of course, through a good history, through maybe journaling your foods. You can kind of track things. But we also, of course, jump in with the muscle testing and kind of use the nervous system and the muscles to test what's going on with the body and figure out where a lot of this is coming from. What might kind of be, kind of the next step here as we're kind of walking through? Like, obviously, we kind of need to identify where it's coming from. But then going forward, like what are the things that we're finding patients need for this? And, should they be drinking baking soda in water? Should they be drinking apple cider vinegar in water? Like what What are maybe some different things that we find connected here that we address a lot that we can draw some attention
Um, can you word that question a little differently? I feel like we can go a
to?
couple directions with this.
We can go a couple directions, and that's totally okay if we do both of those things. But yeah, essentially, like, let's kind of jump into like talking just about what are the things that we find that really helps people with this. Like, what does that look like?
Okay.
Like, if a
Okay.
patient's coming in,
Yeah.
obviously we're going to go through and try to work to identify what's going on. But like, what does that look like for the patient? Like, let's kind of give them a picture of if they come in, like, what's that look like?
So this whole process starts with, what have you noticed makes it better or worse? Back in school they taught us what's the acronym LOPPQRST or something like
Oh
that.
my goodness, dude.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
What was it? Yeah.
Location, onset, provocative, palliative, quality, radiation, tender or
Man,
timing,
you have amazing
something like
memory.
that.
Amazing.
Um, but it's a part of the history taking process where it's, where does it hurt? When does it hurt? What provokes it? What makes it better? All of those things. And whether it's a
Yeah.
musculoskeletal complaint or whether it's an internal complaint, it all applies. It all absolutely applies. And so keeping that in mind, if you're trying to go through, say you looked and you can't find somebody to go to, or, say you just want to try to troubleshoot this on your own, try to identify some sort of timing, some I guess identification of what makes it better, what makes it worse, what are some things that you can tie to it, so then that way you can start your critical thinking process of what's driving it. Keep a food journal. You have to. People, I don't know about you, but sometimes it can sound so simple, but if somebody doesn't say it to you, you're just never going to think of it and actually do it.
Yeah.
Just say, hey, do
No,
a
it's
food log. This is probably one of the most common complaints that I'll say, do a food log or food journal, whatever you want to call it, because it'll help you identify, is it just one food group? Is it a food sensitivity, allergy, whatever you want to call it? But then it could be FODMAP foods that are contributing to infection. Does it hurt all the time? Does it burn all the time? Opening the eyes of the patient to, okay, what things, if we track it more specifically, can be contributing. Because a lot of times I'll find too, you say that to patients and they're like, oh, I've been doing that. Well, they haven't been doing it as effectively as they think. And so once they actually start doing it, they're like, oh, well, I guess there is a pattern. But opening their eyes to that, one, and then from there, figuring out what truly is going on. And that's more so our role with the muscle testing and stuff. But say you're at home, if you're suspecting a food sensitivity, natural antihistamines like, say, quercetin, camu, vitamin A, any of your methylation nutrients are going to help clear histamines as well. Um, Spleen tissue. So a couple companies have just straight spleen tissue supplements from cows. It's a bovine spleen tissue supplement, which can help the immune system regulate and calm histamine production. All of those things will be helpful to calm the immune system down if there is some sort of food sensitivity. And so goal is, even if you think it's 2 or 3 foods, I mean, if it gets rid of your symptoms and you're miserable, eliminate all 3 foods. Figure it out for a week or two and take, even if it's all of those things, take them and see how that goes. Because, if it means being on medications the rest of your life and being miserable and taking 3 or 4 supplements for a couple weeks and eliminating some foods, all things considered, that's not really that bad. There are far worse things that I've asked patients to do. Um, Now,
totally.
with infections, that can be a little different. There could be
Yeah.
H. pylori, there could be, small intestine or large intestine, fungal, bacterial, parasitic overgrowth, you name it. The list of herbs, I mean, the manual that we use for the specific technique that we do, systems healthcare, it has a page with all kinds of common antimicrobials for viruses, bacteria, fungus, parasites, you name it. And it takes up quite a bit on the page. And so to just kind of troubleshoot on your own antimicrobial herbs to try to deal with these things, it can be kind of a shot in the dark. And whenever we work through telemed stuff with patients, we'll basically go about it from a statistic standpoint with what things over the last couple months in the office have been testing the most. And so a lot of the herbs that we'll end up doing for that end up being things like astragalus root, andrographis, neem, golden thread, golden seal, Oregon grapefruit, gentian root, noni fruit. Um, I mean, there's more on the list, but it just keeps going and going.
Yeah.
Antiparasitics can be black walnut, artemisia, all the ones that you typically read about online. I mean, they're all legit, but sourcing is really a big thing too, where there's certain
Definitely.
companies that, we use Supreme Nutrition a lot, We Botanical, Ancient Ways Herbs. Just kind of all depends on what the patient needs, what they test for, all that stuff. But
Yep.
if you're going about it from at home, maybe you try the top three that we recommend, which honestly something like maybe andrographis, Oregon grape, gentian root, noni. I mean, I would probably start with something along that line and see if that causes any sort of relief or curbing of your symptoms. And from there, say you take one herb for a couple weeks, does good for a while, and then starts creeping back. Well, that just means you probably need another herb or need to cycle through something. And so it can be a little
Mm,
difficult to troubleshoot on your own. Another thing to keep in mind is anytime or keep in mind the nervous system irritation or the neurologic irritation of the cardiac sphincter. The inflammatory driver will contribute to it. Now, anytime there is an infection, there's always some sort of byproduct that your lymphatic system and liver, gallbladder need to dispose of. And
yep.
so I've seen plenty of times where we deal with infections and there's no infection left, but then we have to deal with the chemical byproducts that are still contributing to problems. And so if your gallbladder, your whole upper GI system is not clearing things out properly, sometimes it's going to cause heartburn. And so you have to clear those things out as well. And so some vitamins, minerals, things that could be helpful for that. Vitamin B3, niacinamide, molybdenum, iron, vitamin B2, vitamin E, glutathione, as well as some other things can be helpful too. But those are all just, generally speaking, good antioxidants and just help open up some liver detoxification pathways to clear out garbage. That's a byproduct of killing off infections.
That's good. That's
So
good. Okay, so
anyway,
to kind of summarize a little bit with you, so overall, like consider foods, track foods, consider food journaling, something kind of as simple as that, and really kind of taking hold of the nutrition point. This is kind of an interesting question. I don't have anything personal on top of my head, but are there any specific foods that you're like, hey, these do tend to help with heartburn? I kind of have an answer in my head. I personally, I don't know of any specific foods other than maybe like aloe vera juice, that kind of thing that can help soothe things. Um, some people have mentioned like slippery elm tends to kind of calm things, or
yeah.
marshmallow roots. But other than that, it's really more of an issue of really fixing the other sources of inflammation rather
Pretty
than just kind
much.
of like soothing things. Would you kind of agree with that?
I agree. And even like, I mean, I've had patients where they're like, oh, I was on vacation, I got heartburn. So I got some noni juice at the health food
Yes.
store. I mean, it very well could be that you have an infection at that point. You know,
Yeah.
it could be that
Totally.
its antimicrobial properties are helping you. And so it's kind of
Yeah.
hard to say in that situation. But with the marshmallow root, slippery elm, camu, things like that, those do help support the mucosal membrane of the stomach and the gut.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so a lot of times in that case, it's kind of like coating it, Unfortunately, I mean, it's a natural way to do it, so I don't want it to sound bad, but it is kind of like Pepto-Bismol or something, where it just kind of coats the stomach lining and makes it so that way things aren't irritated.
Yeah, totally. So tracking foods, considering the different things we talked about. Obviously, do foods irritate things? Do kind of what's driving the inflammation? Do you have any symptoms of bacterial overgrowth in the gut, or fungal overgrowth, or even parasitic infections? I will say, we've talked a lot about gut health in different episodes. Of course, we have different episodes specifically on gut health that we did quite a while ago. I think we did like a part 1, 2, and 3. Um, but like those are all super helpful things, and I want to dive into those just a little bit more because I do think that is a lot of times at the root of things. So to kind of start with, like I mentioned this a little bit ago, high omega-6s. If you eat fried foods and that really sets it off, you probably have high omega-6s. You probably need more omega-3s. And what I find for people is usually they need EPA. a fish oil kind of more concentrated in EPA, which EPA is found in fish oils, and then of course grass-fed beef. But what I find is that the fish oil you get is really, really important, because if you have a fish oil that has like the same amounts of EPA and DHA, your body's not gonna. It seems like the body doesn't quite absorb the EPA as well. And so if you get a fish oil that's, I like to use Pro EPA from Nordic Naturals. It's got like 800, maybe 850 milligrams of EPA compared to like 200 milligrams of DHA. And I find taking, two of those fish oils like 3 times a day for people that have issues with fried foods really setting it off. I mean, that tends to provide a lot of relief with the inflammation, help to detox those things. I think it helps the bile flow and stuff like that. So I would say fish oil can be really helpful, really supportive, especially if you notice fried foods set things off. Dr. Tim, we've talked about sometimes high stomach acid is the issue. Can we touch on that as far as there's kind of an at-home test, right? So if you drink, some apple cider vinegar in water, and that helps things feel better. My understanding is, that's usually a sign that, okay, the acid's probably a little bit low. And then on the other hand, if you drink, some baking soda in water and that worsens things, that would be another sign that, hey, your acid's a little bit too low. Have you kind of investigated that much? I know I personally don't do that a lot with patients just because I don't think we generally need to. But if I'm talking to somebody over the phone and they want to try that, that's a really good test, I think, to kind of tell where the stomach acid level might sit. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I have had a lot of patients that we find low stomach acid on that it's due to food sensitivities or infections. And even when they increase acid in the short term, because the immune system is still active in there, it
Yeah.
makes things worse
I
if
see.
they add
Okay.
more acid in. And so I really think that it is more so circumstantial that you have to get rid of some sort of inflammatory stimulus first
Yeah.
before you can, I guess, get a true reading on that.
Yeah.
Because some
Yeah.
people it
That
makes
makes
it feel
sense.
better. Other times, it will make things incredibly not happy.
Yeah, that makes sense. Hiatal hernias can oftentimes kind of contribute to gastric reflux, heartburn issues. Um, the way I communicate that with patients, if they've had any testing done or been told they might have a hiatal hernia or if they've done research on it, the way I kind of communicate that, and I'm curious if you have any thoughts to add to this, is that the hiatal hernia is usually a dysfunction with the diaphragm and just, again, really the nervous system. And a lot of people that have heartburn issues have maybe more of like a functional hiatal hernia, which means that the stomach is pressed up into the diaphragm, and that increases the heartburn issues. But it's not necessarily something you see on like an x-ray. Sometimes when it's really progressed, it's really bad. You see it on an x-ray, it's obvious.
Yeah. A legit
But what's
medical
crazy,
definition.
yes, yeah, the medical kind of definition there. But what's crazy is I've even had patients that come in, they've had the x-ray and it looks bad. And we go through the muscle testing, kind of figure out what's causing it. And oftentimes we go back to the gut health, different infections. We take care of that with herbs. We, of course, have to address nutrition and any sources of inflammation. A lot of times we have to deal with stress a little bit as well. And what I find is those patients will get massively better. Oftentimes they get so well, they don't even care about the fact that they had been told they had a hiatal hernia. They don't really go back in for imaging because they feel so well. And so they just kind of go on their way. And so I usually tell them, like, it'd be cool to see what it looks like now, to see if it's actually changed without surgery. But, a lot of times I'm like, I just want you feeling better and doing better. And that's kind of the core thing for people practically. So hiatal hernias, I just want to touch on that, Dr. Tim, because I don't know if we touched on that a whole lot yet in this episode. All right. I think, Dr. Tim, my last kind of thoughts, and we can kind of summarize here and kind of wrap up. My last kind of thoughts here would be, we've talked about foods being super important. We talked about in general how the cardiac sphincter between the esophagus and the stomach is huge, and that becomes dysfunctional through neurological reasons, i.e. gut infections, inflammation, stuff like that, foods that provoke it. And so, to kind of summarize, like, yes, you got to identify the triggers, identify what provokes it. If you eat food and then you lay down and you have heartburn, okay, you're not digesting it well enough. You need to give your body more time. So maybe when you eat, go on a little bit of a walk to help kind of process some of that food through your intestines, and then lay down. So some of that's kind of some common sense stuff with that. But then also you have the other piece where, okay, it could be coming from some gut issues. So if you have bacteria and fungus, you might have bloating, you might have gas. Those are things for our listeners to look into a little bit more and consider some of the different herbs that we recommend there. If anyone ever has like burning, a lot of times I find, there may be some kind of like ulcer kind of developing. And that's more like a deep burning in the abdomen. A lot of times I find Morinda can be super helpful with that. Of course, aloe vera we talked about can calm sometimes esophagitis and things like that too. But Dr. Tim, as we kind of wrap up things, to our patients, if they're wanting to try things at home, a lot of times I'll definitely recommend, like, hey, start on a fish oil. It's going to help with inflammation no matter what. Most people have issues with that anyways because we eat out and there's seed oils and all the different things. If you have any gut issues, foods that provoke things, obviously try to identify those. If you always have bloating, there is something that you're eating constantly that is irritating things. So consider the low FODMAP diet. That can be super helpful. So investigating some of that can be really helpful. But Dr. Tim, if somebody's trying things at home, a lot of times I'll tell them, hey, try either the apple cider vinegar or try the stomach acid supplement. And you just take one or two and just see how you feel. If you get like obviously more burning, obviously your body's not liking that, don't use that right now. If you get like a warm glow in your stomach, not a burning, but a warm glow, it basically means that your body has tapped out on how much acid it can handle. Without it being, super painful. But sometimes that can be super helpful for them just to kind of try at home and just see if that helps. Sometimes that's a home run. I mean, sometimes that hits it out of the park and people feel amazing and helps their digestion like crazy. I've had some people that's just been incredible for. But of course, everybody's different, and that's what makes this so exciting for us and a little bit frustrating as well for everybody. So Dr. Tim, any kind of last comments, any last remarks on this topic of heartburn and just helping people to find relief and find healing?
All in all, I mean, I think we covered everything. Just try to track your symptoms, figure out what's provoking things, and then that way you can better troubleshoot and figure out exactly what's driving it and how to move forward with things. That's the best advice. The more information you have, the better. So,
yep.
But let's wrap things up.
Yep.
I guess actually final remark here. Gallbladder dysfunction can also lead to some heartburn, and so we do have a dedicated episode to fix your gallbladder, all that stuff. So that's why we really didn't get into it a whole lot today. But I encourage you guys to listen to that episode as well. But anyway, let's wrap up. So I am Dr. Tim Augustiniak down here in Bentonville, Arkansas at Flourish Functional Wellness Center. If you want to find me online, my website is draugustiniak.com or flourishfwc.com. On the homepage, have links to all the socials as well as contact info for the office. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or suggestions for future episodes, feel free to reach out. Let us know.
I love it. I'm Dr. Joel Miller. The practice here is Freedom Health and Wellness in Flower Mound, Texas. The website is drjoelmiller.com. If you guys have any questions, reach out to our office. We'd be happy to get connected with you, whether it's a free phone consult or just texting if you guys have any basic questions. Guys, thank you so much for listening. We hope this has been helpful. If you have any topics you want us to cover, reach out and let us know. We'd be happy to consider them. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a great day, have a great week, and we'll look forward to seeing you guys in the next one.